Porsche keys hit the desk with a heavy clatter that silenced the entire office. "Happy bonus day, my father," Richard announced, his voice booming across the open-plan floor. He was grinning, the kind of self-satisfied grin a man wears when he thinks he is being generous. But he was not looking at me. He was looking past me, beaming at my brother, Brandon. "A little token of appreciation," Richard said, sliding the keys across the polished wood. For a record-breaking year, the entire staff of Sterling Events watched in stunned silence. I felt my stomach drop. Not with surprise, but with a cold, sickening realization. The surplus he was talking about, the money that had paid for that sleek, black German engineering sitting in the parking lot, was not profit. It was my commission. $55,000 of it. "Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the ringing in my ears. "That is my commission check." The room went dead silent. Richard's smile did not falter, but his eyes hardened. He turned to me slowly, performing for his audience. "Mary," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Don't be dramatic. You are just a 1099 contractor. Brandon is the heir. He needs a company car to look the part. Stop acting like you own a seat at the table." I looked at the keys. Then I looked at the single, solitary copy of the VIP client list sitting on my desk. It was the only physical record of every high-net-worth contact we had, the lifeblood of the company, sitting right there next to my coffee mug. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just picked up my purse. Before I tell you exactly what I did with that client list, and how my father's greed became his own executioner, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from. I want to see how far this story travels. I sat in my 10-year-old sedan, watching the rain blur the neon sign of Sterling Events in my rearview mirror. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. I am Mary. I am 28 years old. And for the last 6 years, I have been the invisible architect behind every major luxury event in this city. I designed the concepts, I negotiated the vendor contracts, and I smoothed over every disaster my brothers created. But to my father, I was not a partner. I was not even an employee. I was a tax loophole. He had sold it to me as freedom when I first started. I remember sitting in his office, fresh out of college, eager to prove myself. Richard had leaned back in his leather chair and explained that making me a 1099 independent contractor was actually for my benefit. He told me it would give me flexibility, that I could write off my expenses, that it was the smart, entrepreneurial way to work. He made it sound like a gift. I was young. I wanted to believe him. I did not realize then that flexibility was just a code word for exploitation. This is the trap of normalizing cruelty. It does not happen all at once. It happens in inches. It happens when you agree to pay for your own laptop because the company budget is tight, only to watch your brother get a brand new company-issued MacBook the next week. It happens when you are told that working 60 hours a week without overtime is just paying your dues, while the heirs to the throne clock out at 3 in the afternoon for happy hour. You start to believe that your suffering is proof of your loyalty. You start to think that if you just endure enough pain, eventually, they will have to love you for it. I learned the true cost of that loyalty 2 years ago in a dentist's chair. I had an abscessed tooth that felt like a hot iron was being driven into my jaw. I sat there, shaking, listening to the receptionist tell me the total cost for the emergency surgery would be nearly $4,000. I did not have dental insurance. Richard said it was too expensive to add contractors to the group policy. I drained my savings account to stop the pain. I spent the next month eating ramen and walking to work to save gas money. The very next week, my brother Tyler walked into the office flashing a blindingly white smile. He had just gotten a full set of porcelain veneers. Purely cosmetic. $10,000 of work, fully covered by the company's Platinum Executive Health Plan. You have to look the part. "Mary," Richard had told me when I asked why Tyler got coverage and I did not. "Clients buy the image." They laughed at my swollen jaw then. They treated my financial ruin like a personal failure of budgeting rather than a systemic failure of their morality. They thought that by stripping me of benefits, by keeping me desperate and hungry, they were keeping me under control. They thought they were breaking me. But as I put the car in drive and pulled away from the building, a cold, sharp clarity washed over me. Richard was a greedy man. And greedy men make sloppy mistakes. He was so obsessed with saving 15% on payroll taxes that he forgot to read the labor laws. By refusing to make me an employee, by forcing me to sign that contractor agreement to save himself a few dollars, he had made a fatal error. He thought he was denying me health insurance. In reality, he was denying himself ownership of my work. He did not own the strategies I built. He did not own the vendor relationships I cultivated. And most importantly, he did not own the client list I had just memorized. He thought he had built a cage for me, but he had actually handed me the keys to the castle. I did not go home to cry. I went home to work. The mayor's charity gala was starting in 1 hour, and I had a very specific resignation letter to deliver. The ballroom was a war zone of tumult, panic, and shouting. The mayor's charity gala was the crown jewel of our annual calendar, a $500,000 production that had to be flawless. But tonight, 1 hour before doors opened, it was a ticking time bomb. The florists were screaming about wilting hydrangeas. The lighting crew was blind because the cues were missing. Everyone was running around looking for the person in charge. They were looking for me. I walked past them, straight to the VIP suite. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The air inside did not smell like panic. It smelled like aged scotch and expensive leather. Richard, Brandon, and Tyler were lounging on the plush sofas, laughing. They were not managing the crisis downstairs. They were toasting their own genius. There she is. Tyler slurred slightly, raising his glass. Mary, tell the caterers to switch the champagne. The vintage is off. Richard did not even look up from his phone. And fix the lighting in the hall. It is too dim. Handle it. Handle it. That had been my job description for 6 years. Handle the mess. Handle the stress. Handle the impossible while they handled the accolades. I walked over to the mahogany table in the center of the room. I took off my headset, the one that was currently buzzing with 12 different emergencies, and set it down gently next to the crystal decanter. No, I said. The word was so quiet it barely registered over the hum of the air conditioning. Richard finally looked up, his brow furrowing in annoyance. Excuse me? I am not handling the champagne, I said, my voice flat and calm. I am not handling the lighting. And I am certainly not handling the mayor. Brandon scoffed, rolling his eyes. What is this? Are you still sulking about the car? Grow up, Mary. Just do your job. That is just it, Brandon, I replied. It is not my job. I checked my contract. The specific scope of work for a 1099 independent contractor does not include crisis management, overtime, or fixing your mistakes. My hours were 9 to 5. It is now 6 o'clock. I picked up my personal iPad from the table. It was an old model. Screen cracked in the corner because I had paid for it myself. But inside that battered device lived the entire nervous system of the event. The run of show, the lighting cues, the dietary restrictions for the donors, and most critically, the VIP seating chart that I had rearranged 3 times that morning to avoid political disasters. It was the only copy. The cloud sync had failed 2 days ago, and I bad not fixed it on the company server because, well, that was not in my contract either. Richard stood up, his face reddening. Put that down. That is company property. Actually, it is not, I said, tucking it under my arm. I bought it. I pay for the data plan. And the intellectual property stored on it? That belongs to the contractor who created it. Good luck with the gala, gentlemen. You walk out that door, Richard snarled, stepping toward me. And you are finished in this industry. I will bury you. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I looked at the 3 men who had built their reputations on my back. You cannot bury someone who was never really there, Dad, I said. I was just a tax write-off, remember? I opened the door and walked out. Behind me, I heard the headset screeching with feedback as the stage manager screamed for instructions that no one was coming to give. I sat on my living room floor, a container of pad thai in my lap, watching the live stream of the mayor's charity gala on my laptop. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, only with better lighting. 10 minutes after I left, the house lights went down for the keynote speech. But because I was not there to cue the spot operator, the stage remained pitch black. For 30 agonizing seconds, the only sound was the confused murmuring of 500 wealthy donors. Then, the wrong music cue fired a high-tempo dance track instead of the somber orchestral piece intended for the memorial segment. It was a symphony of incompetence. Then came the climax. Richard, realizing the ship was sinking, did not try to bail water. He tried to find someone to blame. He stormed onto the stage, grabbing the microphone from the confused MC. His face was a mask of sweat and fury, illuminated by the harsh glare of the house lights that someone had finally managed to turn back on. Ladies and gentlemen, please, his voice boomed, cracking slightly. We are experiencing technical difficulties because of a disgruntled contractor who decided to sabotage this event. My daughter, Mary, abandoned her post in a fit of jealousy. The crowd did not gasp. They went dead silent. The camera panned to the mayor in the front row. He was not looking at Richard with sympathy. He was looking at him with the cold, dead eyes of a man who realized he had hired a clown to run his circus. I took a bite of noodles. I did not sabotage you, Dad, I whispered to the screen. I just stopped holding up the sky. Richard was still ranting, waving his arms, trying to salvage his ego by burning my reputation. He did not realize that in the world of high-stakes events, excuses are the death knell of credibility. Nobody cares why the lights went out. They only care that you let them. My phone rang. I looked at the screen, expecting to see Tyler or Brandon ready to scream at me. But the name flashing on the display was not family. It was Elena Vance, Chief of Staff, Mayor's Office. I swallowed, wiped my mouth, and swiped answer. This is Mary. Mary. Elena's voice was clipped, urgent, and entirely devoid of small talk. I am currently standing in the hallway of the ballroom, while your father creates a public relations nightmare on stage. Please tell me you have the donor list. I do, I said. And the seating chart. And the dietary restrictions. Good, she said. The mayor is hosting a private donor dinner next month. We need to send apologies and save face immediately. Can you handle it? I can, I replied, my voice steady. But Elena, you should know I am no longer with Sterling Events. I will be operating under my own entity, starting tomorrow. I do not care what name is on the invoice, Mary, she snapped, though her tone softened slightly. I just care that the person running the show isn't the maniac currently screaming into a microphone. Are you hired? I looked at the laptop screen one last time. Richard was being ushered off stage by security, still shouting about loyalty. I am hired, I said. That night, while my father drank himself into a stupor wondering how I could be so cruel, I onboarded my first 3 clients. I did not have a logo. I did not have a website. I just had the one thing Richard thought he could get for free. Competence. The migration had begun. The migration was not a trickle. It was a flood. 3 months after the mayor's gala imploded, I wasn't just surviving. I was dismantling Sterling Events one contract at a time. I had launched M-Event architecture from my living room. But I did not need to advertise. My phone simply would not stop ringing. It turns out, in the high-stakes world of luxury events, nobody cares about legacy or the name on the door. They care about who answers the phone. At 2 a.m., when the ice sculpture melts, I watched the collapse from a distance, like a driver passing a wreck on the highway. Richard lost the tech summit. Then he lost the Hospital Foundation annual. Brandon and Tyler tried to run the autism awareness walk and forgot to file for the city noise permits. The police shut them down 20 minutes in. They were bleeding money, reputation, and ego. And like a wounded animal, Richard did not retreat. He attacked. The cease and desist letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was heavy, printed on thick, expensive bond paper from the city's most aggressive law firm. Notice of intent to sue for misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, and tortious interference. I scanned the legalese. He was accusing me of stealing proprietary vendor lists and confidential donor data. He wasn't just trying to stop me. He was trying to bankrupt me with legal fees before I could even get off the ground. I did not have time to process the fear because my phone buzzed. It was Richard. Coffee shop. 3rd and Main. Now. Or I send the sheriff to your apartment. I grabbed my purse. I did not go to negotiate. I went to gather evidence. When I walked into the cafe, Richard was already there. He looked 10 years older. His skin was gray. His eyes bloodshot. He wasn't the imperious CEO anymore. He was a desperate man watching his kingdom burn. You thief, he hissed the moment I sat down. He did not even wait for me to order. Hello, Dad, I said, placing my phone face down on the table, recording app running. I got your letter. It is very dramatic. Richard slammed the table hard enough to rattle the cutlery. You stole my business, Mary. My clients. My life. I didn't steal anything, I said evenly. They asked for the person who actually did the work. That happened to be me. You used my resources. My contacts. I fed you. I clothed you. I hired you when you were nobody. You gave me a tax classification, I replied. No benefits. No future. His face twisted. I'll ruin you. He overturned the table, cups shattering. The cafe froze, while he screamed about his lawyers, his money, how I would crawl back. I walked out and hired a lawyer I couldn't afford. She scanned the lawsuit and grimaced. He's serious. He doesn't care if he wins, he wants to drain you. I had no money for a long court fight. But I did have a plan. 3 weeks later, the night I won Agency of the Year, applause thundered. Then it died. Richard stood at the exit with security and a lawyer. Serve her, he ordered. A thick envelope hit my chest. A lawsuit for theft and espionage on stage, in front of the industry. He leaned in. I'm going to bankrupt you. You belong to me. I reached into my purse and pulled out one sheet of paper, my weapon. You can't sue an employee for stealing clients, I said into the mic. Because I was never your employee. His smile cracked. This is a 1099. For 6 years you classified me as an independent contractor. No payroll tax. No insurance. No W-2. I looked at the room. As a contractor under IP law, the work is mine. His lawyer stopped flipping pages. Everyone understood. You didn't lose your company to a thief. I told Richard. You handed it to me to save 15%. The cameras caught his face collapsing. I accepted the lawsuit and walked away. The IRS hit Sterling events a week later. Fines, back taxes, vanishing clients within 45 days, the company was gone. My brothers lost their titles, cars, and cushy lives. I built my own firm, staffed with people who are paid properly and treated well. Clients come to us because we earn them. Yesterday, Richard texted, begging for help. The bank was taking his house. I blocked the number. Then I signed a renewal contract for double his old fee. They thought burying me would finish me. They never realized they planted a seed.